A spilled drink in a Mafia club can get you fired, but correcting the boss's math? That's usually a suicide mission. Nia King knew this better than anyone, yet she stood frozen near table 1, her tray trembling ever so slightly against her apron. Outside, the Chicago wind howled, battering the frosted windows of the velvet room with snow that had been falling since noon. It was December 23rd, and the city was burying itself in white, but inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars, pine needles, and the heavy, suffocating weight of power. Nia adjusted her grip on the silver pitcher. She was 32, a black woman with sharp eyes that she had learned to keep lowered. For 6 months, she had perfected the art of invisibility. She moved through the shadows of the dining room like a ghost, refilling glasses and clearing plates without making a sound. She touched the small, makeup-created scar on her cheek, a daily reminder to stay in character, to remain just the help. But tonight, the numbers on the table were screaming at her. "Move, Shadow," Rocco grunted, waving a thick hand at her without looking up. "Let the men talk." Rocco was Arthur Sterling's underboss, a man who wore suits that were too tight and a sneer that was too loose. He looked at Nia not as a person, but as an obstacle, a piece of furniture that happened to breathe. Nia clenched her jaw, her knuckles turning white against the pitcher, but she stepped back into the gloom. "As I was saying, boss," Rocco continued, his voice oily with false confidence. He tapped a leather-bound ledger spread open between the crystal whiskey tumblers. "The winter storms in Jersey killed us. The union fees went up again. We're looking at a 12% loss on the logistics overhead. It's all there in black and white." Arthur Sterling sat opposite him. At 62, Arthur was a relic of a different era, a man of silence in a world of noise. He swirled his neat scotch, his gray eyes unreadable. He didn't look at the book. He looked at Rocco. 12% is a lot of snow, Rocco. It's inflation, Arthur. You know how these dock workers are. Nia poured water into Arthur's glass. She tried not to look. She really did. But her eyes snagged on the open page. The columns of figures were messy, handwritten in hasty ink, but to Nia, they were as clear as a neon sign. Her brain, wired for forensic patterns from a life she had supposedly left behind, processed the data in a nanosecond. The math was wrong. It wasn't a mistake. It was a lie. The carryover sum from the port fees had been inflated. Rocco had calculated the tax on the gross weight, but subtracted it from the net revenue in the next column. It was a lazy, arrogant subtraction error designed to hide a surplus. He wasn't losing money to the weather. He was skimming it into his own pocket. "Walk away," a voice screamed in her head. "You are Nia King, a waitress who barely finished high school. You do not know math. You do not see the theft." She took a step toward the kitchen. Through the swinging doors, she saw Chef Sam, the old man who slipped her extra soup on cold nights, pacing anxiously. Rocco had threatened to fire the kitchen staff to cut costs if the numbers didn't improve. If she walked away, Sam would lose his pension. Nia stopped. The injustice of it, the sheer stupid arrogance of Rocco thinking he could treat people like dirt and steal from the man who paid him, ignited a fire she couldn't extinguish. She turned around. The room was dim, the jazz quartet playing a soft, melancholic tune. "Excuse me, Mr. Sterling," Nia said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the low hum of conversation like a dropped glass. Rocco's head snapped up. His face turned a mottled red. "What did you say?" "Get back to the kitchen, girl." "It's not 12%, Nia said, stepping into the light of the chandelier. She didn't look at Rocco. She looked directly at Arthur Sterling. "It's 3%. The other 9% is a subtraction error in column B. The carryover sum doesn't match the gross weight." Rocco stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. He reached for his waistband, his eyes bulging with fury. "You lying little, I'll teach you to." "Sit down, Rocco," Arthur said. The command was soft, but it hit with the force of a hammer. The jazz piano stops. The entire restaurant holds its breath as Arthur puts on his reading glasses, looks at the ledger, and then looks up at Nia. "Show me." The layout of the Velvet Room's office was designed for silence, but the loudest thing in the room was the sound of a waitress breathing. Nia sat in the high-backed leather chair opposite the desk, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The room was a sanctuary of mahogany and old money, insulated from the blizzard raging outside and the jazz music downstairs. The only light came from a green-shaded banker's lamp and the glow of the Chicago skyline through the floor-to-ceiling window behind the desk. Arthur Sterling stood by a sidebar, his back to her. The clinking of crystal was sharp in the quiet. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, the sound of the pour steady and deliberate. He walked over and placed 1 glass in front of Nia. "Drink," he said, his voice gravelly but not unkind. "You look like you're waiting for an execution." "I don't drink on the job, Mr. Sterling," Nia said, her voice automatic. "You aren't a waitress anymore, Nia." Arthur sat on the edge of his massive desk, crossing his ankles. He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes drilling into her. "I just ran the numbers again. You were right to the penny. Rocco has been skimming from the shipping manifests for 8 months. Total loss $450,000. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Silas? Rocco is no longer employed. Ensure he doesn't take anything with him. Or say anything." "Understood, boss," came the crackling reply. Nia shivered. The dismissal was clinical, cold, and permanent. She started to stand. "I should get back to my station. Table 4 needs." "Sit down." Arthur didn't raise his voice, but Nia sank back into the leather. "A waitress in Chicago worries about tips and tired feet. She doesn't spot a forensic accounting error in a split second from 5 feet away. Who are you really?" Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment she had feared for 6 months. If he dug too deep, he'd find the empty space where Nia King's past should be. He'd find the ghosts of the cartel trial in D.C. "I'm just someone who likes numbers," she said carefully, meeting his gaze. "Numbers don't lie, Mr. Sterling. People do. I saw a bad equation, and I fixed it." "You fixed it," Arthur repeated slowly. He stood up and walked behind his desk, gesturing to the chaotic piles of folders that covered every inch of the surface. It was a disaster zone of paperwork, receipts, ledgers, and tax documents thrown together in a hopeless jumble. "My accountants are either idiots or thieves. Rocco was just the one you caught. This whole empire is bleeding, and I don't know where the wound is." He looked at her, and for the first time, Nia saw the exhaustion behind the power. He wasn't just a mob boss. He was a CEO trying to keep a sinking ship afloat. "I'll pay you $10,000 a month," Arthur said. "Forget the apron. I need someone who can see the code." Nia looked at the mess on the desk. Her fingers twitched. It was a forensic accountant's nightmare, but it was also a puzzle begging to be solved. If she stayed, she was walking into the lion's den. But if she left, she was just a shadow again, waiting for the past to catch up. She took a breath. "If I do this, I do it my way. I dig deep. And you might not like what I find." "I don't pay you to be liked, Nia," Arthur said, a faint smile touching his lips. "I pay you to be right." Nia reached out and pulled the nearest stack of files toward her. She opened the top folder. The chaos of figures stared back at her, but in her mind, they were already rearranging themselves into patterns. "I need a red pen," she whispered. Arthur opened his drawer and slid a heavy, expensive fountain pen across the mahogany desk. "Welcome to the family, Nia. Don't make me regret this." Nia had traded her apron for a red pen, but the ink she was about to spill would be far more dangerous than blood. It was 2 a.m. The blizzard outside had turned Chicago into a white void, burying the streets in silence. Inside the office, the only sound was the furious clicking of Nia's keyboard. Empty pizza boxes and coffee cups littered the mahogany desk. "You found something," Arthur said. He wasn't asking. He was standing by the window, watching the snow fall, looking 10 years older than he had this morning. "I found everything," Nia said, not looking up. "Rocco was just a rat eating the crumbs. You have a wolf in the house, Arthur." She spun the monitor around. "A shell company in Zurich called Blue Horizon. Every month on the 15th, a wire transfer goes out. $7 million over the last 2 years. Arthur frowned, walking over. "I don't have business in Zurich." Before he could look closer, the office door swung open. "Merry Christmas, Artie." William Sterling walked in, shaking snow off his cashmere coat. He was Arthur's younger brother, handsome, charming, and holding a box of expensive Italian panettone like a trophy. He brought the smell of cold air and expensive cologne into the stale room. William stopped when he saw Nia sitting in the boss's chair. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, dripping with condensation. "Working the cleaning staff late, aren't we?" William chuckled, setting the cake on the sidebar. "Or is this the new entertainment?" Nia went still. The insult was casual practiced. "She is my auditor, William," Arthur said, his voice sharp. "Nia, this is my brother." "Auditor?" William laughed, peeling off his leather gloves. "You're letting the help read the books now? That's cute, Artie. Really progressive." He glanced at Nia with eyes that were cold and dead. "Make sure you don't smudge the ink, sweetheart." He poured himself a drink, toasted his brother, and left as quickly as he came. "Don't stay up too late. We have the board meeting tomorrow." The door clicked shut. The silence returned, heavier than before. Nia didn't speak. She typed a single command into the terminal. "Trace authorization key." The screen flashed. A digital signature appeared next to the Blue Horizon transfers. It wasn't an anonymous hacker. It was a specific, encrypted user ID. Nia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. She looked at Arthur. "The transfers," she said, her voice steady. "They require a biometric key. A retinal scan or a master password." "So?" Arthur asked, swirling his drink. "So, the key used to authorize the $7 million is the same key that just unlocked the elevator 5 minutes ago." Arthur stopped. The glass froze halfway to his mouth. "Show me," he whispered. Nia pointed to the screen. The ID matched perfectly. W Sterling_admin. "It wasn't a glitch, Arthur. It wasn't Rocco." Nia looked him in the eye. "It was William." Arthur stared at the glowing screen. His face drained of color, the betrayal hitting him harder than a bullet. He set the glass down. It rattled against the wood. "Impossible," Arthur breathed, his voice breaking. "William is my blood. Blood doesn't steal from blood. Betrayal is like a hairline fracture in a windshield. You don't notice it until the pressure hits, and then it shatters everything." The boardroom on the top floor was a cage of glass and steel, suspended over the whiteout of the Chicago blizzard. At 9 a.m., the light was gray and unforgiving. Around the long table sat the 6 captains of the Sterling Empire. At the head sat Arthur. To his right, an empty chair. To his left, William, looking relaxed, picking lint off his silk lapel. The doors opened. Nia walked in. She wasn't wearing the stained apron anymore. She wore a tailored charcoal suit Arthur had provided, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She didn't look like the help. She looked like a blade. "Gentlemen," Arthur said, standing up. "Before we discuss the shipments, we have a pest control issue." William smirked. "Another audit, Artie? Did someone steal office supplies?" "No," Nia said, her voice projecting clearly across the room. She dropped a heavy portfolio onto the polished table. It slid down the length of the wood and stopped directly in front of William. Someone stole $7 million to fund a war against his own brother. The room went dead silent. William didn't open the folder. He just looked at Nia with amused contempt. "You let the maids speak at the table now? This is embarrassing." "Open it," Arthur commanded. William flipped the cover. His eyes scanned the bank transfers to Blue Horizon. Then he saw the second document, a communication log with Viktor Volkov, the rival Eastern European boss. The smirk vanished. "You're old, Arthur," William said softly. He didn't deny it. He leaned back, checking his phone. "The Volkovs are the future. They understand that honor is just a word poor people use to stay poor." "You sold us out," a captain shouted, standing up. "I saved us," William snapped. He pressed a red icon on his phone screen. "And I'm the only one walking out of here." A heavy mechanical thud echoed through the room. The electronic locks on the double doors engaged. The vents overhead hissed, but instead of fresh air, a distinct chemical smell began to flood the room. "Halon gas," William announced, standing up and walking toward the emergency exit, which beeped green for his phone. "Fire suppression system. It sucks the oxygen out of the room in 60 seconds. You won't die painfully. You'll just go to sleep. Open the door." Arthur fired his handgun at the glass, but the bullet ricocheted off the ballistic pane. Panic erupted. The captains clawed at their throats. The air was thinning instantly. Nia didn't run to the door. She ran to the head of the table where the room's main control tablet sat. "You can't stop it," William taunted from the doorway, holding his phone up. "I changed the encryption." "You changed the user password," Nia wheezed, her vision blurring as the oxygen levels dropped. Her fingers flew across the screen. "But you were too arrogant to reformat the root directory." William froze. "What?" "I have admin access," Nia gasped. She typed a final command. "Override. Ventilation purge." The hissing stopped. The vents roared to life, reversing the flow, sucking the gas out and blasting fresh, cold air into the room. The green light on William's phone turned red. The main doors clicked unlocked. William stared at her, his face a mask of pure shock. "How? You're just a waitress." The doors slid open. Arthur lunged forward, pistol whipping William across the face. William crumbled to the floor, bleeding. "She's the architect," Arthur growled, aiming his gun at his brother's head. But before he could pull the trigger, the floor beneath them shook violently. A deafening boom echoed from the lobby, shaking the glass walls. "Volkov," Arthur realized, looking down at the street where black vans were swarming the entrance. "His army is here." The difference between a getaway driver and a mathematician is that the driver calculates speed, but the mathematician calculates angles. Nia was doing the math as she sprinted down the concrete stairwell, sandwiched between Arthur and his massive bodyguard, Silas. Above them, the lobby was a war zone. Volkov's mercenaries had breached the front doors, and the sound of automatic gunfire echoed down the shaft like thunder in a canyon. They burst into the underground parking garage. It was a cavern of gray concrete and flashing emergency strobes. "The armored SUV," Arthur shouted, pointing to a black vehicle parked near the exit ramp. "Get to it." But as they ran, tires screeched. A heavy cargo van marked city maintenance roared down the ramp, skidding sideways to block the exit. The side door flew open, and 3 men in balaclavas poured out, raising assault rifles. "Get down." Silas tackled Nia behind a concrete pillar, just as the air filled with the deafening crack 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 of bullets. Concrete chips rained down on Nia's hair. She curled into a ball, clutching the building control tablet to her chest. This wasn't a spreadsheet. This wasn't a discrepancy in column B. This was war. "We're pinned," Silas yelled, firing his handgun blindly around the pillar. "I can't clear the ramp. They have high ground." Arthur looked at his car. It was 50 feet away, too far. "We need a distraction," he grunted, checking his magazine. Nia looked past the pillar. To her left, a row of luxury electric sedans sat plugged into the wall chargers. They were sleek, silent, and heavy. Her eyes locked onto a steel gray model. "I can give you a battering ram," Nia shouted over the noise. "You have a gun?" Arthur asked. "Better." Nia tapped the screen of her tablet. "I have root access to the garage grid." She didn't need to hack the car directly. She hacked the charging station. The garage was a smart zone, meaning the cars were connected to the local Wi-Fi for updates. Nia's fingers flew across the cracked screen. She bypassed the user authentication. She found the vehicle ID. Protocol, summon. Safety sensors, disabled. Acceleration maximum. Incoming. Nia screamed. Across the garage, the gray sedan's headlights flared on, blindingly bright in the dim garage. The engine hummed a high-pitched electric whine that rose instantly to a scream. The mercenaries turned, confused. The car launched itself forward. It didn't have a driver, but it had a target. It accelerated with the silent violence of an electric motor, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, smashing into the flank of the blocking van with the force of a missile. Crunch. The impact was thunderous. The van tipped onto 2 wheels and crashed onto its side, crushing the cover the shooters were using. "Move." Arthur grabbed her hand. They sprinted past the wreckage. The attackers were dazed, scrambling over the overturned van. Silas dove into the driver's seat of Arthur's SUV. Arthur threw Nia into the back and jumped in. Silas threw the car into reverse, spun them around, and roared toward the gap the electric missile had just created. As they sped up the ramp and burst out into the snowy Chicago streets, merging into the chaos of traffic, the adrenaline finally hit Nia. She was shaking. Arthur looked back at the burning wreck in the garage mirror, then at Nia. "You weaponized a sedan?" he asked, a tone of pure disbelief in his voice. Nia gripped the tablet, her breath coming in white puffs in the cold car. "It was just a variable," she whispered. "I just changed its direction." In the underworld, a man with a gun is dangerous, but a woman with a bank code is lethal. The Boneyard docks were a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and frozen puddles. It was midnight. The wind coming off Lake Michigan was sharp enough to cut skin. Viktor Volkov stood in the glare of his convoy's headlights, surrounded by 20 mercenaries armed with assault rifles. He looked like a king waiting for an execution. Arthur's SUV stopped 10 yards away. The doors opened. Arthur stepped out, buttoning his coat against the chill. Nia followed him. She wasn't hiding behind him anymore. She wore a white wool coat that glowed in the darkness, standing tall, clutching her tablet like a shield. Volkov laughed, a harsh sound over the wind. "You bring a girl to die with you, Sterling?" "I expected more dignity." "I didn't bring her to die," Arthur said calmly. "I brought her to audit you." Volkov sneered. He raised his hand. Behind him, 20 rifles snapped up, aiming directly at Nia and Arthur. The click of safety catches, disengaging, echoed in the silence. "Kill them," Volkov ordered. "Wait," Nia shouted. She didn't flinch. She took a step closer to the guns. "Before you pull that trigger, check your bank accounts." The mercenaries hesitated. "What is she talking about?" Volkov screamed. "Fire! I am speaking to the labor." Nia's voice rang out, powerful and clear. Viktor Volkov's assets were flagged 5 minutes ago by a federal algorithm for terrorist financing. His accounts in Estonia, his crypto wallets, his cash reserves, they are all frozen. She held up the tablet. The screen displayed a terrifying wall of red zeros. "Check your phones," Nia challenged the men. The wire transfer for this job was scheduled for midnight. It bounced. "He's broke. He can't pay you." One of the mercenaries, a giant man with a scar, pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen. His eyes widened. He looked at the man next to him, who shook his head. "It's zero," the mercenary grunted. "It's a glitch," Volkov yelled, sweating despite the freezing cold. "I'll pay you double in cash." "He has no cash," Nia said coldly. "If you shoot us, you go to prison for a pauper. If you walk away, you just lose a night's sleep." The silence stretched, heavy and dangerous. Then, the giant mercenary lowered his rifle. "No money, no bullets," he muttered. He turned around and walked away into the dark. It was the beginning of a landslide. One by one, the 20 men lowered their weapons. They didn't look at Volkov. They simply abandoned him. In the criminal world, loyalty ends exactly where the money stops. Within 60 seconds, Viktor Volkov was standing alone in the snow, shivering, stripped of his power by a woman he had dismissed as a waitress. Arthur walked up to him. He didn't draw a gun. He pulled a single envelope from his pocket and tucked it into Volkov's coat. "A one-way ticket to Brazil," Arthur said. "Leave Chicago tonight. If I see you again, I won't bring an auditor. I'll bring a hearse." Volkov looked at Nia with fear in his eyes, then turned and vanished into the shadows of the docks. Christmas morning. The Velvet Room was warm and smelling of cinnamon and roasted duck. It was closed to the public, but the staff was there, celebrating. Chef Sam was laughing in the kitchen, his job safe. Nia walked into the dining room. She reached for her apron out of habit, but Arthur stopped her hand. "Not today," he said. He led her to table 1, the boss's table. He pulled out the chair opposite his own. "You saved my life, my family, and my business," Arthur said, pouring 2 glasses of vintage wine. "You are not an employee, Nia. You are the architect of this family." He raised his glass. Outside, the snow fell gently, covering the scars of the city. "To the partner," Arthur said. Nia smiled, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. "To the numbers," she replied, and clinked her glass against his. In a world that often values loud displays of power, Nia teaches us that a sharp mind and a brave heart are the quietest, yet deadliest weapons of all. She reminds us that true worth isn't worn on a sleeve or written on a name tag, but is hidden in the brilliance of those we might easily overlook. So tomorrow, take a moment to look deeper at the people serving you. You never know if you're standing in the presence of an architect waiting to build a better world.